Okay, let me get right there. Okay, so Shabbat Shalom, everybody that is here, those that are online, and those who are watching later. This week, we are in Genesis 47, verse 28, and this is the last parsha of Genesis. So it is called Vayechi, which starts in 47:28 and goes through the end of Genesis. So we will be starting Exodus next week. And then the Haftorah portion is 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. And so this week's parsha is not long, but it covers a lot. And Vayechi is called And He Lived. And so it covers the death of two individuals. It covers Yaakov and Yosef. And it also covers Yaakov giving the prophetic blessings over his sons. So usually as I begin, studying for each parsha each week, I try to, read through the whole parsha, but then I also go back and look at what I did in the previous year, see if there's something new, and if there's, if y'all wants me to go in what direction. So,
well, I need to ask you something. When he was giving the blessings, I went back and started studying that yesterday, and some of those wasn't good blessings.
Yeah.
So explain all.
Yeah, well, we can do.
Because only like 2 or 3 had a good blessing.
So, and this year, I did want to sort of look and focus in a different direction than I did last year. And so let's start in Genesis 47, verse 28. And it starts, Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Thus Yaakov lived to be 147 years old. The time came when Israel was approaching death, so he called for his son Yosef and said to him, if you truly love me, please put your hand under my thigh and pledge that out of consideration for me, you will not bury me in Egypt. Rather, when I sleep with my fathers, you are to carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried. And he replied, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear it to me. And he swore to him. And then Israel bowed down at the head of his bed. So we start with Yaakov is approaching his death. And I wanted to look at verse 29 in different versions because I noticed something here the way it was written. Okay, so does anybody want to read a different version? Do you have a different version? Because I read it out of the completes. You want to read?
Julie?
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Okay.
Jack's got something different.
You want to read verse 29 out of yours, Jack?
Jack?
And the time drew near that Israel must die. And he called his son Yosef and said unto him, if now I have found favor in your sight, put, I pray you, your hand under my thigh. If they'll come and trade with me, bury me not, I pray you in Egypt.
Okay, that's very similar to the King James. The King James says, at the time drew nigh that Israel must die, and he called his son Yosef, and he said to him, if now I found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. Okay. Anybody else want to read theirs that's in a different version?
Mine just says out of consideration to me.
Okay.
That's what yours says too.
Same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The NET says the time for Israel to die approached. So he called for his son Yosef and said to him, if I've now found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt. So I want to look at that part about where it says, after, I put your hand under my thigh, and then it's what it says after that. And in Hebrew, it says, Amadi, Hesed, Ve'emet.
What is that?
Okay. So in Hebrew, it doesn't really say kindly and truly. It actually says Hesed ve'emet. Hesed is grace, and emet is truth. So it actually says, do me with grace and truth. And the rabbis noted something striking here, because whenever the Torah uses the phrase hesed ve'emet, it refers to a kindness that is done with no expectation of a reward. Because if you think about what Yaakov is asking Yosef to do.
Is that where it says, if you truly love me?
Yeah, if you do it kindly and truly.
So it says hesed.
Hesed ve'emet, yeah. And so, because if you think about it, he's asking Yosef to do a kindness toward him that he can't repay. Because he's going to be dead. He can't repay it. And so it's a kindness that is pure, selfless, and it is aligned with emet, truth. And so, this is why, it is the ultimate example they say here is like caring for the dead here, or someone that is dying, or, because a burial, a eulogy, or, a final act here, that the person cannot repay you. There's no social benefit that you can get from that. It is just you doing something out of purely giving out of your heart. And so Joseph is doing a kindness here that can never be repaid.
Jacob knows it's a long way to take him back to where he wants to be buried.
Right.
And Joseph would be the one to do it, him and his brothers. So I guess that's why he's putting it that way.
Yeah. And so, like I said, this, hesed ve'emet is basically you're doing something for someone and you never get paid back. You don't expect to ever get paid. Yeah. So let's go to, which that phrase is important, hesed ve'emet, and then let's go to the Brit Hadashah. Let's go to John chapter 1. And let's go to verse 14. John chapter 1 and verse 14. Okay. It says, the Word became a human being and lived with us, and we saw his Shekinah, the Shekinah of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Do you remember what those two words were in Hebrew that we read in verse 29? Or it said, hesed ve'emet. Hesed means grace. Emet means truth. So look at how Yeshua is being described in John 1. He is full of hesed ve'emet. So Yeshua is being described as being full of hesed ve'emet. So basically, he's full of doing something for us that we can never repay back.
True.
Unmerited favor.
That unmerited is more than it, but it's, emet is truth. So it is that grace, that unmerited favor, but it's also rooted with Torah, that he's doing it just out of the goodness of his heart. And so, Yaakov.
What about the scripture, it was in John 2, which says Moses gave us Torah, Yeshua gave us grace.
Yeah.
So he's saying that both was given to, from God to them to give to us.
Right.
Correct?
Right. Yeah.
So when we pray for healing, he does that just out of his own goodness upon us, his love for us.
Yeah, that it's just, what Yeshua did was, him giving us eternal life is all for the goodness, that he can never, and that he never expected it back.
Is that the correct statement?
Which one? About
Moses gave us Torah and
let's find that verse exactly.
That's John 1.
Where John 1 what?
I think it's 5 or 6, 7 right there in John 1. I'm reading it.
I'm not sure. I don't see it. Verse 17. Yeah, for the Torah was given through Moshe,
Yeah.
that and grace and truth came through Yeshua.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So there are two different, the Torah is all of the word.
That it was given through Moshe. Yeah, that Moses is the one who received it and gave it to the people.
They put it there though. It almost sounds like
It's a
you didn't have
separation.
grace in Torah.
I think that's just how we're reading it. And you've got to remember. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And it's not necessarily what they're addressing there, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's not that you didn't have grace, because we clearly see there's grace
Right.
in the Old Testament all throughout. So
Right.
Yeah, in verse 16, it says, we have all received from his fullness grace upon grace.
yeah, and that we know that there was grace throughout
Yeah.
the Old Testament. So okay, so Yaakov, who's also called Israel, makes Yosef swear to bring his bones back to the land. And if you think, Yosef's been living for the last basically 30 years in Egypt. And, why is it so important for Yaakov's bones to be brought back to the land?
Yeah.
Why is it so important that he have his bones brought back to the land?
Because that's the promised land.
It's the promised land.
And Joseph went back to Shechem.
Mm-hmm.
That's where his bones.
Yeah, but why would it be so important for him to, it is the promised land, yeah.
Well, he now.
So he could inhabit the land.
Mm-hmm.
Well, too, he knew what was gonna happen. They would be in bondage for 400 years
Yeah.
or more. And he wanted them to be took home first before that. I think that period came about, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a lot, but Joseph's bones remained
Yeah,
until that time they
came out, yeah.
Also, you ever have to go back to the land, the covenant had been broken too. They've been buried in Egypt.
Well, no, not really. Not the covenant isn't dependent on where he was buried.
No.
So, but, but I do think, it had a tie to, when you look at what he's trying to do, I think he's trying to get Yosef's lived the last 30 years in Egypt, basically with Pharaoh, like a father to him, as a son under Pharaoh, and that he's wanting him to have a connection to the land, not to Egypt. He's wanting him to understand and have a connection with the roots in the land, that you've got to
get out of it
Mhm.
before that 400 years. Is it 400 years they were at?
Well, no, they were in Egypt about 210. Yeah.
Well, just imagine just the heirs from Joseph wouldn't burn him in Egypt, but the rest of his brothers would.
So, yeah. So, and two, when you look at, I think, it's about him making that connection, because who is he? His name is Israel.
Yeah.
And that he's, he's being brought back into the land. And I'm amazed too that you have so many believers that have no connection to the land of Israel.
Yes.
And, yes, the nation of Israel today has a secular government, but it's not the government that I'm connecting to. It's the land itself, which is Yah's land. It's the land he chose. It's the land that, what's the millennium, where the tribes are going to be. It is, we're not going up to heaven to stay in some place, but the new Jerusalem is coming down, and that is going to be where you are living.
They ain't got connected. That's our homeland.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They believe they replaced
Right.
everybody. Truthfully,
Yeah.
they were placed in.
But that's, you know,
Never that way.
and I too think that, you know, the whole prophecy aspect of it is that you need to have a connection to those roots and not to Egypt,
Yeah.
not to what the world is in Egypt. So,
And as far as that goes, is we're in Egypt.
Yeah.
We're,
Yeah.
You know, our connection as us, as a
Mhm.
group, has that connection with the land. We, you know, you can tell a difference when we go there.
Right.
We don't want to leave.
right.
And a lot of people don't.
Yeah, a
They
lot, yeah.
just don't. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like another vacation place for them.
Yeah.
And that's what's so sad is they don't think of it as their home.
Right.
But I know the first time I went, he was leaving to come back home. I could feel the ruach.
Just pull it. Yeah. There's a spiritual connection.
Mhm.
Okay. Genesis 48. Okay. Verse 1. It says, a while later, someone told Yosef that his father was ill, and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Yaakov was told, "Here comes your son, Yosef." Israel gathered his strength and sat up in bed. Now, so what I find interesting is if you look at the whole prophetic picture of what their names are, Yaakov heard that Yosef was coming and he was strengthened. So think about who each one of these people are. Because Yaakov is also renamed Israel. Yosef is a picture of the Mashiach.
Mm-hmm.
And so look at that verse again. When Israel hears that Yosef, the Mashiach, was coming, Israel is strengthened. So,
That, and that sentence tells it all right, even right now.
yeah, to think about, you know, when
Yeah.
you think about that picture that when Israel, when Yeshua returns, that Israel is going to be strengthened. Yeah.
And right now, with everything that's going on, has been going on, if Israel would turn more,
Mm-hmm.
then they would know that the Mashiach is coming and they'll be strengthened and they'll fight. I know there's still gonna be a remnant left.
Yeah.
But still, it would help the whole of the whole, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do better.
Okay, so then we go into Yaakov's blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, don't want to go much into the blessing of that this year. You know, so if you want more on that, you can go back to last year's, but I just want to read over that part. Yaakov said to Yosef, "El Shaddai appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he saying to me, I will make you fruitful and numerous. I will make you a group of peoples, and I will give this land to your descendants to possess forever. Now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine, Ephraim and Manasseh, as much mine as Reuben and Shimon are. The children born to you after them will be yours, but for the purposes of inheritance, they are to be counted with their older brothers." So, and we know that, you know, the story goes on here that Ephraim and Manasseh were already descendants of Yaakov. So, you know, that's his grandchildren. So really, he doesn't have to adopt them. But if you look that one verse, it says it was for the purposes of the inheritance. Yaakov was elevating them for the purpose of inheriting. So in essence, Yaakov is giving Yosef a double portion because he's giving it to Ephraim and Manasseh. He's giving him two portions instead of just Joseph getting one. He's giving two. Ephraim and Manasseh are getting one. So this double portion was given to Yosef through his two sons. Now, you know, I think there's also another picture of why he was doing this it was another effort to sort of stem the tide of assimilation from Egypt, because these two sons were born in Egypt. they were raised, in the early part, probably, in this very pagan culture. And so by elevating them from a status of a grandson to a son, he's establishing that Ephraim and Manasseh are going to have a future and an inheritance. And the inheritance wasn't about the money, it was about the covenant. So it was about the blessing, and it's about land. Okay. So Yaakov was blessing them with these pagan children with an Israelite identity. So again, there's that prophetic picture that Yaakov, being a picture of the father, was blessing the children of Yosef, us, Yeshua, Yosef being Yeshua, with an Israelite identity. Because remember in Ephesians 2:11, it says, what was it about? Let me go there. I don't want to misquote it. Therefore, remember your former state. You were Gentiles by birth, called the uncircumcised by those who merely because of an operation of their flesh are called circumcised. So we miss that a lot of times because we were former Gentiles. So does that mean you're a Gentile now? No, you were former that. And then it says, and at that time you had no Messiah. So when you were a Gentile, you didn't have the Messiah. You were estranged from the national life of Israel. You were foreigners to the covenants embodying God's promise. You were in this world without a hope and without God. And he says, now all of that's past. You're not that anymore. You are what? Then you have Messiah. You are a part of the life of Israel. You have God's promise and you have, so that's basically, what he's doing is he's blessing Joseph's children with that Israelite identity.
All right. This is supposed to a question. Was Ephraim and Manasseh circumcised when they were born?
We don't know.
Because they were in a...
We don't know.
I mean, and also Athanath was a relation, so she was Hebrew too.
Yeah,
So
but
they wouldn't have been considered pagan, but
well, they were raised like they were pagan, just like she was. Yeah. And so, we don't know. I do know that
because Joseph stayed close to the Lord during all that time, he didn't turn to the
I mean, we have to just make assumptions there. I do know that ancient Egypt did circumcise too, but they did it when they were much older. They did it like when they were
later, like 7 or 8 years old.
No, they did it when they were like 13.
Oh.
So, but other ancient cultures did circumcise. It wasn't just Jews that were only circumcised. There were other cultures that did circumcise, but they did it for different reasons, and it was much later in life. It wasn't on the 8th day.
Like
so
Moshe and Zipporah, he circumcised
Yeah.
but didn't the other, and then she had to do it.
So we don't, there's no way to know there. So, okay. And another thing to note here is that, when he blesses them, we see the reversal again of the firstborn, which is a reoccurring thing because we see Yitzhak being blessed over Ishmael. Ishmael is the firstborn. We see Yaakov being blessed over as firstborn over Esau. We have Yosef getting the firstborn over his older brothers. Same thing with David. Remember, David was chosen as king over his older brothers. And so the Torah keeps reminding us and emphasizing that Yah chooses not based on your chronology, not if you're literally firstborn. He's choosing you based on your mission.
And he can see and know the heart. And
Right.
He knows,
And what he does here is Yaakov crosses his hands, and by crossing his hands, he's making the sign of an X, which in Paleo Hebrew, is actually the ancient form of the letter Tav. And the letter Tav is a seal. And so Yaakov is basically sealing Ephraim and Manasseh as their future with the tribes here, and their blessing becomes irreversible. So, okay. One of the things that stuck out to me this year is not only that this is the 12th parsha of the year. And I got to thinking about right before we started that what's today's date? Third. Okay. Do it in numbers. 1, 3, 26. 1 and 3 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 6 is 12. So this parsha is the 12th parsha of the year. And this Shabbat's date is 1/3/26, which also adds up to be 12. So it's got the number 12 here connected. And the 12th parsha is the parsha that has the prophetic blessing over the 12 tribes, which is for the last days, the Aheret Hayamim. And 12 Hebraically is linked with governance, order, and covenantal structure. And so I think it's really a prophetic thing that we're reading this 12th parsha today, and it's talking about the 12 tribes, and it's basically a picture of a sealing or sealing completion of these tribes and their blessings. And, it covers, the blessings of all of these tribes, but it's also about establishing his covenant structure and order and how governing,
You said the X in ancient paleo is the top.
Yeah, and the top is a seal. Mm-hmm. And so the blessing over these tribes are relevant for the end days. So think about this. Does that mean the 12 tribes are in the end times? If Jacob's saying, look at verse 1, then Yaakov called his sons and said, gather yourselves together, and I will tell you what's going to happen to you in the Aheret Hayamim, the last days. So are the tribes going to be in the last days? Yeah, they're going to be there. However, do many people recognize them?
Yeah.
Do they even know where they are? So the tribes are in the end times. And so if they're there, if you believe in Yah and hold to his ways, then we're grafted into one of those tribes.
That's someone pretty bad, like Benjamin. I never saw that tribe, but he blessed him. That blessing was, he just, I'm like, well, I kept rereading that.
Yeah. Well, and too, we think about what we think of as a blessing as opposed to what these really are. So he's calling them together to give them a message.
Is that why we won't see them? It's because they're so.
Well, I think it's because who are they? Who are the 12 tribes? They are the remnant, just like it says in Revelation 12. It doesn't say that the dragon's going to come after those who hold to the testimony of Yeshua. It says, because all the Christians around the world are holding to the testimony of Yeshua. But it says the dragon is coming after those who hold the testimony of Yeshua and the commands. So who are then the tribes? I think they're those that are holding to Torah and the testimony of Yeshua. So, this is not just the father here, Yaakov, giving parting words to his sons. I think he's revealing the hidden structure of the tribes here,
of their lifestyle and their generation,
and what that this is sort of the spiritual DNA of Israel. And Yaakov sees each son's strengths, their weaknesses, and their potential. And so it's really a lesson for us because
He's seen them raised up and what they've done. And, some of it against what God wanted. to
right.
do.
But he sees all that because, and true blessing is not seeing only the good in somebody.
Right.
True blessing is seeing someone fully and calling, forth what is best, their best self. So, I read we'll go back 49 verse 1. Then Yaakov called his sons and said, gather yourselves together, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the Aheret Hayamim. Assemble yourselves and listen, sons of Yaakov. Pay attention to Israel, your father. So Yaakov is going to focus on the future or the end times. And he's telling all of the tribes to gather and come together. Now, notice in verse 1, it says, gather yourselves together. It actually in Hebrew is the word He asupu. Okay. He asupu. And then notice in verse 2, it says, assemble yourselves. Okay. So, and you would think gather, assemble is going to be the same word, but it's not. Kavatsu is the word that's here. So there are two different words used. The first word, hey, asupu, is actually got the root asaph, which is where we get Joseph's name from. Okay. So Joseph is a gathering. That's himself. And we've got two different words used for gather. So there's two different gatherings mentioned here in the last days. Well, to me, this is paralleling. There's two different gatherings. There's the first Exodus and the second Exodus. And there's these two different words show us too that there's a physical gathering that's going to take place because asupu means for you to come near. Okay. You're going to come and gather near. So there's a physical gathering that they did, but then hikavatsu is actually not, now that you're here, you're going to have to gather in a different way. You're going to have a heart gathering. Okay. So there's a physical gathering, but there's also a spiritual gathering.
And assembly, the spiritual one? No.
It's the same word. I mean, they both mean assemble or gather.
Oh, okay.
So it's just, but they're two different words in Hebrew. So when you look at the sages say that these two gatherings are symbolizing the two different kinds of unity that Israel must always maintain, that they must have that physical unity where they're gathering together, that they're being, together as one people, that they're coming together. They're not forsaking themselves to get together on Shabbat, that they have that physical gathering. They're sharing a land. They're sharing that destiny. They're sharing that identity. But then there's also that second gathering, which is that spiritual unity where they're sharing, their purpose. They're sharing the Torah, that even when they're physically scattered, that they remain one spiritually. And you think about, Jews today, most of them are scattered all around the world. But what are they doing on Shabbat? They are still, part of their prayer is to pray for Jerusalem, to pray for your protection, to pray. They are still in unity, even though they're not in the land. So it's, those two different kinds of unity. Not only is it physical, but it's also the spiritual.
I assume every one of them too pray the Shema day and night.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they're religious, usually, yeah. Okay, and notice in verse 2, in Genesis 49:2, it uses Yaakov, but it also uses Israel. Hikvatsu ve'shemu b'nei Yaakov ve'shemu el Yisrael avichem. So Assemble and listen, sons of Yaakov. Listen to Israel, your father. So it's using both names, but it's talking about the same person. So Yaakov is the biological father. Yaakov's a man. He's the individual. He's the one who's the father of the 12 sons here. But he also is using listen to Israel. Israel here is your spiritual father. Israel is the one who's going to, talk about the nation, the destiny. He's going to talk about the prophetic identity that you have. So this verse means, you sons of Yaakov, you are my children by birth, but you got to listen to Israel. You are heirs to a national spiritual mission. You've got to hear these words in your spirit and look at them, what he's saying, what's being reflected spiritually. So Yaakov is the father, but Israel is like the prophet. And, it's two different kinds of listening, because you can physically hear somebody talking, but do you spiritually hear what they're saying? And so each one of Yaakov's sons were blessed, including Ephraim and Manasseh, and each blessing is specific and prophetic for each tribe. In verse 28, I'm going to just skip down to verse 28 a minute. It says, and all of these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and that is that their father spoke unto them and blessed them, everyone according to his own blessing. He blessed them. So they don't get just one generic blessing here. They get individual blessings here. And I want to look at some of these in detail. Now, I've also got, the tribal studies. So if you want to look at a specific tribe as we're going through, I've done some of those already. You can look in the link and check those out. But okay. Now, I believe we're grafted in Israel. So as a part of Israel, we are grafted into one of these tribes. And I don't believe we get to choose which tribe we are. Oh, I want to be this one just because I like it. I think it's done by our personality traits. So, and these are looking at the prophetic picture. And so I think there's one specific blessing here that's a prophetic picture for each person, each believer here for them. But you got to remember that as we mature, we tend to learn from others, and hopefully we acquire some of those good traits and those positive things. And so on another level, this all is a show of the spiritual journey for all of Israel. And so by looking at the overview of the blessings, it sort of forms a map of our walk or our journey. So
when his children were born, he named them because of their name meaning something. Right?
Well, usually the mothers named them. Yeah.
Okay.
He didn't.
So then when he was doing the blessing, through the years he's seen, so this blessing is a different.
But it's also about, he saw what spiritually they had and the potential that they have. Yeah. Okay. So just a quick overview, like Reuben, we see his passion a lot. Shimon and Levi, we see the intensity that they have, the fierceness. Yehuda, we see like with leadership. Zebulun, he's about, going out and expanding. Issachar is really the inward study. Dan, justice. Joseph, like the spiritual resilience, and Benjamin, basically like this holy fire. So, I mean, that's just a few of them. So as we look, Yaakov's words here are to teach the whole person, the whole nation, and that they need all of these traits in balance. And these tribes are the 12 basically facets of the human spirit. So let's look at these blessings. Okay, verse 3. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, the first fruits of my manhood. Though superior in vigor and power, you are as unstable as water. So your superiority will end because you climbed in your father's bed and defiled it. He climbed onto my concubine's couch. So Reuben, as the firstborn, had the potential to be the firstborn and to get, the double portion and to lead the family. But look at what it says. He is unstable as water. And remember what I said about Reuben, the passion. He's impulsive. He doesn't show restraint. So if you think about what is that, if this is a map for us being Israel, what is that lesson for us? Is that greatness requires not only passion, but it also requires restraint and discipline.
Yeah, he doesn't think things through before he does it. He just does it impulsively.
Right. And so as being part of Israel, then we need to be passionate about things, but we also need to be disciplined.
Yeah, we have to step back and look and see. Yeah.
Okay, verse 5. Shimon and Levi are brothers, related by weapons of violence. Let me not enter their counsel. Let my honor not be connected with their people. For in their anger they killed men, and at their whim they maimed cattle. Cursed be their anger, for it has been fierce. Their fury, for it has been cruel. I will divide them in Yaakov and scatter them in Israel. And remember, what they did over with Shechem raping Dinah, how they went out. Okay. So
Levy, is that the same as the
Levites? Yes.
And wow.
Yeah.
Just listen, they go, God called them to do the.
So think about here. Shimon and Levi's anger, their fire that they have is basically their defining trait. Yet their fire is destructive when they're together, and it must be transformed by Yah. So they're separated. Shimon basically becomes like the teachers and the scribes in Israel, and Levi becomes the Levites or the priest.
Right.
And if you look at where their land is separated, okay? And so when we think about this, our lesson for us is we need to have that fire because we're part of Israel, but we need to make sure that our fire is fire for Yah and it's guided by him, and that it doesn't become anger and revenge and destructive. Because we can become so zealous for the Torah that we're basically murdering somebody, or
Oh yeah, but one time it was, he drove the spear through.
But
that was for God.
But that was for God, because why? It was
aiming God,
and that was keeping the sanctity of the temple or the tabernacle
so
there.
There's time,
So, but that's not. That was more for the God, not for revenge. There,
right.
We want to sometimes be right with things, with the Torah, where we're right about this, and then so we slaughter and murder people with our tongue, becoming the Torah police or whatever. So we have to make sure that our fire, like I said, is for Yah and it's guided by him, and that we don't let it become anger or destructive there. Okay, verse 8. Yehuda, your brothers will acknowledge you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down before you. Yehuda is a lion's cub. My son, you stand over the prey. He crouches down and stretches like a lion, like a lioness who dares to provoke him. The scepter will not pass from Yehuda, nor the ruler's staff from between his legs, until he to whom obedience belongs comes, and it is whom the people will obey. Tying the donkey to the vine, the donkey's colt to the choicest grapevine. He washes his clothes in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Okay, so first of all, Yehuda and Yosef have the longest and richest blessings here. And I don't think that's something that's by accident, because Yehuda and Joseph, represent the two pillars that basically are going to lead Israel's destiny. Yehuda, is the, the king, is where the kings descend from. They're going to be the one over the moral authority. This is where we get the Mashiach, from the Mashiach ben David, as he's called. And then Joseph is the one who is the picture of provision. He's the one who provided for them. He was one that was for their survival. And that's where we get the aspect of the suffering, the Mashiach ben Yosef from. So if we look at Yehuda's here, it says that he is going to be a lion. He's going to be demonstrating kingship, leadership, courage. And actually in the Hebrew, what you don't see is that it uses different words for lion because it's talking about the different stages of a lion's life. Like the cub, as they're, the teenage lion, and they're maturing. And so there are different words for lion, and it demonstrates the maturity in leadership. And so if you think about here with Yehuda, it's talking about the lesson is true leadership is moral and steady and self-controlled. It's when, we see that he is that mature lion. If you think about that mature lion, he's just sitting there, he didn't really get up. And the young one is the one who's going out there growling, making all the noise and doing all that stuff. He's sitting back just waiting. He's like, you gonna come to me and I'm going to just wipe you out. That's it. And so he's demonstrating his maturity, there, but he's self-controlled. He's, moral steady. Now,
has there always been a remnant in Israel? Even though there was no Jews allowed, in Jerusalem, there walls or anything. Has there always been someone from Judah?
in the land?
Judah, yeah. Because Judah, plays a big role at the end because they're.
Yeah, I mean, there's been,
So always has been.
somewhere,
Judah,
mhm,
somewhere.
in the land,
Okay. I guess that was what God planned it, though.
Yeah.
That's because all the way down to the birth of, Messiah and all that.
And notice here it says, okay, the scepter will not depart from Yehuda until Shiloh, or to one to obedience belongs, comes. Okay, so that show the scepter, the kingship, is going to come from Yehuda.
Mhm.
Until Shiloh comes. Shiloh is believed to be the Mashiach, both by, Judaism and Christianity alike. But, I also think there's more than just a general picture of the Mashiach here, but specifically talking about Yeshua, because when you look at the word Shiloh, Shiloh can also be read as two words in Hebrew, she and lo. Okay, and she is a gift, and lo means to him. Or lo means also no, but it's also him. Okay, depends on how it's written here, to him. And so Shiloh is also basically a gift to him, or man, of mankind. It's the gift to the world. So the Mashiach is the gift to the world.
Mm.
And when we look at the phrase Shiloh comes, Yavo Shiloh, when we look at that in Hebrew and we look at the numerical value, Yavo Shiloh, the Yud is 10, the Beit is 2, the Aleph is 1, the Shin's 300, Yud is 10, Lamed 30, and then the Hay is 5, is 358, which is the same value as the Mashiach. So Shiloh comes is the same value as the Messiah. And looking at some rabbinic sources, Rashi wrote that until Shiloh comes, that is King Messiah, who is the kingdom. Modern Jewish and liberal scholars hesitate to admit that this is a reference to Messiah because it will open up the door to believing in, a personal Messiah like Yeshua. Now, something else that I found interesting is that when we look at the blessing of Yehuda, not only does it say that, talking about we're going to have a king, The scepter is going to be Yehuda's, but we also got the picture of the Mashiach coming from Yehuda. But notice that we've got a donkey there too. And, we know about Yeshua riding into Jerusalem on the donkey, but there's a donkey in the Talmud. Okay. We have a reference in the Talmud that questions how Mashiach's going to arrive because.
Why does it say tying his donkey to the vine?
Okay. Because the vine is a picture of Israel.
Right.
Okay.
So basically it's not vine he's tying. It is.
Well, it could be physically, but it's also a picture of spiritually being there tied to Israel.
Okay.
Okay. But, because in Daniel says that the Mashiach's going to return on the clouds.
Yeah.
And so, Judaism reads Daniel as well, and they read Genesis. So they're like, well, wait a minute. We've got a picture here of Mashiach coming on a donkey. We've got a picture of Mashiach coming on the clouds. So this is what it says in the Talmud. And I'll put the link in the notes part. But it says, Rabbi Alexandri says, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi raises a contradiction. So he's saying that this is how this discussion arose between two depictions of the coming of the Messiah. It is written, there came with the clouds of heaven one like the Son of Man. And there was given to him dominion and glory and kingdom, and his dominion is an everlasting dominion. That's in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. And 7, 13 and 14. And Talmud also says, and it is written, behold, your king will come to you. He is just and victorious, lowly and riding upon a donkey and upon a colt, the foal of a donkey, written in Zechariah 9:9. So Daniel and Zechariah, Daniel says he's coming on the clouds. Zechariah says he's coming on a donkey. We just read in Genesis 49 that Messiah is linked with this donkey here. And Rabbi Alexandri explains it this way. So listen to how they explain it. If the Jewish people merit redemption, the Messiah will come in a miraculous manner with the clouds of heaven. If they do not merit redemption, the Messiah will come lowly and riding upon a donkey. So that's how they explain the difference there. Was Mashiach on the donkey or was it a cloud? But now going back to
Donkey.
so for
In the clouds, though,
right,
later on.
I look at it that this is showing Messiah's first coming and his second coming.
Right.
That he is going to fulfill both of those, but it's his first coming and then his second coming. So it is true. It's just that,
But
Yep.
at different times, if they could open their eyes and see it.
right. And if you think about what they're saying, okay, well, the Messiah, if we don't merit redemption, that he's going to come not as this king, he's going to come lowly and riding on a donkey. And that's what exactly Yeshua did.
Yeah.
So now, if we go back to Yehuda's blessing, there's another interesting phrase here.
If you think about that, that's awesome, ain't it? Because this story, God sent him and then took him back with him. That's his son.
Yeah.
And now he's on, the fire of life.
Yep, he's fulfilling both of them. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so another interesting phrase in Yehuda's blessing, it says, he washes his clothes in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. Why would Mashiach wash his robe in wine? I mean, that doesn't make sense because if you spill wine on your clothes, it's hard to get out.
Yeah.
And, many, I know, Christian interpretations have interpreted this to mean that when Yeshua returns, his robe is going to be stained with the blood of his enemies. Okay.
But there's two right there. One's his clothes, and the other one's his robes, which is washed separate. I mean, and wine for the clothes and robes and blood of the grave.
Well, they call it blood because the wine is the red like this.
Yeah.
So it's, his being washed there. And so
Are you fixing to say,
Yeah.
that's just, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of interesting here, because, yet this is a blessing. So how is this a blessing if it's talking about, Christian interpretation is that this is, he's going to be stained with the blood of his enemies. But when you go back to understanding of ancient times, we get a clearer picture of what it's talking about. Because wine was a staple of life in the ancient Near East. It was a symbol of joy and celebration. And so for someone to have, nobody's really going to wash their clothes in wine. That's not going to be something you're going to do. But if you were doing that in ancient times, your garments are being washed in wine. It's symbolizing that you've got an overabundance and prosperity, and you've got this divine blessing. You just have so much, it doesn't matter. You've got another garment, It's just a picture of saying, I'm overly blessed with this prosperity and abundance. So this part of the blessing of Yehuda is basically foretelling that Yehuda is going to be blessed with an abundance and prosperity. People are always with all these conspiracy theories about, the Rothschilds and they're, Hollywood's controlled by the Jews or whatever. That's part of the blessing for them, is that they were going to have all of this money and have prosperity, that was something that was to be done, and it was for a reason. Now, the image too, of washing the garments in wine, like I said, is showing this overflowing abundance. Because in a land where wine is plentiful enough to be used for washing your clothes, is showing that your prosperity is beyond, ordinary measure. So this is basically like a hyperbole, like when you say, I did that 1,000 times, and you didn't really do it 1,000 times, but it's, hyperbole. Okay. And it's basically, underscoring the richness and the fertility that they were going to have, that their descendants would have. And so it also, suggests that there's a time of peace and prosperity where, the land's going to be able to produce. It's so bountiful that they're going to have all those resources. That's, one thing about Israel, when you put water to that desert, it's going to bloom. It's going to do it's, Now, this also made me think about something else that I think we misinterpret, because it says that his garments are going to be washed in wine, right? His robes. But we've all heard, we're washed in the blood, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Where do we get that from?
He's gonna come back with blood on this robe.
Garments, okay? But Revelation 1:5. This is where we get that from. Revelation 1:5. It says, and from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness and the first begotten of the dead and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us and who washed us from our sins in his own blood. Okay. So that sounds like we are washed in the blood, right? We've all heard that.
Yeah.
But blood, you think about, if you are touching something with blood, it's like,
Yeah.
so nothing that is related to the temple was ever washed in blood.
Mm-mm.
We see people, when Moses enacted the covenant, he sprinkled blood on the people, but he didn't wash them. Okay. Now, I will put a link in the notes so you can go to this too. But part of what we see, because remember, Revelation is written to specific congregations. Okay. It was written to specific congregations.
Blood is what we have to live. But it also has germs in it. That's why nothing like in the temple. We
Right.
couldn't, and we're not supposed to eat blood
Right.
of stuff.
So why does that mean we're washed in the blood? But when we look at Revelation, what is here is talking about in Revelation is tied to Sybil worship. And there is an ancient ritual that was called Tarabolium, and I'll put the link so you can go look at the information. Then this Tarabolium ritual that was happening during the time of these churches of Revelation, a high priest in this pagan cult, Roman cult empire, would stand in a pit, and a bull will be led onto the platform above the pit. They would sacrifice the bull, cut the bull's throat, and the blood would run down, covering them and pouring onto the priest, washing him in the blood. So his garments would be red. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a pagan form of worship. But when we look at Revelation 1 and 5, when it says, and from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness and the first begotten of the dead and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. When you look at that word washed in the Greek, it does not say washed. It is actually the word, I think, luo. And this is what it says in the concordance. I don't think it's translated correctly, because if you look at the Greek, this is what luo means: to be loosed, untied, set free, to destroy or to bring an end or abolish or do away. So if you go back to where it says, unto him that loved us, he washed us, or he loosed us from the sins by his blood. Yeah. So being washed in the blood is really like a mistranslation of that into English, because that was something that the pagans did. They would wash themselves in the blood of the sacrifices. Okay.
Yeah, because God commands, things about the blood, and that, wash yourself. I mean, I ain't gonna go sit it down. I mean, I love God, but I don't think I can sit one.
Well, and you even think, there are some, like, even pagan rituals where we see like they are cutting an animal and the neck, and they would drink the blood and stuff. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the milk and the blood. So
yeah.
Okay, so going back to the blessings here in Genesis 49:13, Zebulun would live at the seashore with ships anchoring along the coast and his border at Zidon. So Zebulun dwells by the sea. This is, he's got the ships, which denotes commerce and trade, but it's also about the ships are going out. That's expansion. It's also about generosity, because they're going out, they're taking goods to places. So Zebulun is often seen as funding the Torah. So again, if we're looking at that, we're Israel here too, and this is giving us a roadmap for us, that a lesson here for us is that our material success should support the spiritual life. It should be about expanding his kingdom. Not for us building up and, making something for ourselves. It's about expanding his kingdom. Okay. Genesis 49:14, Issachar, a strong donkey lying down in the sheep sheds, and on seeing how good is settled life and how pleasant the country, he will bend his back to the burden and submit to forced labor. So again, we've got Issachar as a donkey, which is, steady, it's enduring, but it's also linked with wisdom. And so here we've got this picture. Our lesson for us is that, our spiritual depth And wisdom requires us being consistent and, and steady and bearing his sacred burden, being devoted to his word. So that's where we get that wisdom from.
Yeah.
Genesis 49:16. Dan will judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a viper on the road, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels so its rider falls off backward. And then also in this blessing, it says, I wait for your deliverance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just
Mhm.
stuck in there.
Yep, it's just stuck in there. So, and we talked about last year how when you look at the chiastic structure that Tony Robinson did, if you want to look at that, you can go back to last year's video. But he points out that the central theme is that verse 18, where it says, I wait for your salvation, your deliverance. Oh, yeah. So that is, there. Okay, so Dan, is a picture of justice. But like a snake is usually not out in the open, it's hidden. He's got a hidden power like a serpent. And so the lesson we learn from Dan here is that justice requires, precision and strategy, just like a serpent, is going to be strategic in getting, a meal or getting something. It's not just brute force, that justice requires us to be strategic in how we apply the word. So, Genesis 49:19. Gad, a troop will troop on him, but he will troop on their heel. So Gad is the warrior troop, and you think about what it says, a troop will troop on him, but he will troop on their heel. That they need to keep pressing in to win. So they've got to endure there. And our lesson is that, we need to endure and persevere in order to win the battle. And that's what Gad does. That's what, he's teaching us there. Verse 20, Asher's food is rich. He will provide food fit for a king. So Asher produces that richness. And we think about Asher's symbol is the olive tree from which we get the oil, the anointing. It denotes splendor and beauty. And so when we look at Asher here, our lesson is that the anointing of the Spirit, brings richness in our lives when we submit to the King. It's about basically him, bringing that anointing and submitting to the King. And then we get Naphtali. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Naphtali, is a deer, a doe. And a deer can walk in hard places, especially in the Middle East, they're walking up these mountains. And Naphtali means to struggle or wrestle. And so when we look at what, the lesson we can learn here is that, in our spiritual walk, we may need to walk in hard places and we need to basically struggle and intercede. And through that, they're going to bear, great rewards, great children here. Then verse 22. Yosef is a fruitful plant by a spring with branches climbing over the wall. The archers attacked him fiercely, shooting at him and pressing him hard. But his bow remained taut, and his arms were made nimble by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov. From the shepherd, the stone of Israel, by God of your father who will help you, El Shaddai will bless you with blessings from heaven above, blessings from the deep lying below, blessings from the breast and the womb, the blessings of your father and more powerful than the blessings of my parents, extending to the farthest of the everlasting hills. They will be on the head of Yosef and on the brow of the prince among his brothers. So remember we said that Yosef and Yehuda's blessing were the two that were the longest. And so Yosef is seen as fruitful and resilient Think about everything that happened in Yosef's life. How his brothers treated him, how he was thrown in the pit, how he was sold. He ended up being accused of crimes. He ended up, going to prison, all this stuff. That he's overcome adversity and, with grace. We didn't see him, complaining all that time. And so our lesson is that, a righteous person here can turn suffering into a blessing. We can be fruitful in the midst as long as we are remaining resilient to his word. We get to verse 27. We've got Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, devouring the prey. In the evening, is still dividing the spoil. So Benjamin, you remember his name is son of the right hand. And he is a ravenous wolf. Okay. Well, a ravenous wolf, they're angry, really. So
Vicious.
So if you think about the son of the right hand, Benjamin, that's Yeshua. But he's a ravenous wolf here. He's protective. He's, what over his land is Jerusalem. When you look at where Benjamin's territory is, it is Jerusalem and the Temple Mount.
Mm-hmm.
So think about what this is saying about Benjamin. He's a ravenous wolf. He has intensity and passion about what? His land, about Jerusalem and its temple. He has that holy zeal. So Yeshua is all about that intensity and passion of Jerusalem and the temple. And he's got the zeal of Yah there. He talks about, when he wept the night before he died, he was like, in the garden and he was weeping. He's like, how, I long to gather you together. He's weeping over Jerusalem. So, and if we look at verse 28, all of these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is how their father spoke to them and blessed them, each giving his own individual blessing. The Hebrew word here for he blessed them is Yavider, I'm tongue-tied. Vayechi, I'm tongue-tied, which is singular. Now, we just read a whole bunch of blessings. And it says, even though each one is different, the Torah calls them Vayechi, one blessing. It's singular. Why? Because there were many blessings there. But it was, the power of Israel not is that each tribe is the same.
Together.
They have to work together. And it's in their unity. They're diverse, but in their unity, they are diversified, that they are being able to accomplish its mission.
Yeah.
Each tribe has its own mission. Each one had its own path.
They have to come together to be strong.
Yes, but they had to come together to form a single nation, a single story, and a single destiny. And so Yaakov's, final act here is he's showing them that, yeah, I've seen your past. I've seen what you're capable of and your weaknesses, but this is also a prophetic picture for Israel in the end times. And think about what he's teaching each one of them. You're not all going to look the same. You're all going to have a different mission and a different path, but you have to be unified and come together like a tapestry, that each thread is different, but each thread is essential in making that tapestry. And so he's trying to show them that this is a picture for their life, that when you think about each one of those blessings over the tribe, yeah, you've got to have that, passion like Reuben, but you've got to be disciplined. You can't be unstable in your walk. Yes, you're going to have that fire like Shimon and Levi, but you can't let that fire for Yah become anger and destructive.
And God made them that way.
Mhm.
So they would have to realize they can't do it by themselves and what their feelings are. They have to come together with their brothers and work together for Israel and God. you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So it's just,
And it's all about being in unity
Yeah.
with each other.
Mhm.
And that's a hard thing because a lot of times what happens, people disagree over an interpretation of a verse and they're all going to separate. Well, I can't hang around with you because you don't believe this. And we need to learn to say, be like Brother Yehuda. Brother Yehuda, like Eddie was saying, they'll sit there in in their studies and they'll sit there and argue with each other. And then they turn around and walk out. Okay, hug each other. We're done. Okay. Well, I don't see your point today, but that's it. And they just go on. It's.
yep, we'll do it another day. We'll talk it over.
Yeah. And, see. Okay. So moving on into chapter 50. Verse 1, Yosef fell on his father's face, wept over him, and kissed him. And then Yosef ordered the physicians in his service to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were spent at this, the normal amount of time for embalming. And then the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. And when the period of mourning was over, Yosef addressed the household of Pharaoh. I would like to ask a favor. Tell Pharaoh, my father had me swear an oath, and he said, I'm going to die. You are to bury me in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. And therefore, I beg you, let me go up and bury my father, and I will return. Okay, so remember, we've got the story here. He's going to want to take his bones out, and he says he was embalmed. And, when you look at Egyptian ancient embalming techniques around this early dynastic period, which would have been around from 5100 BC to around 4600 BC, which also continued down to the New Kingdom period in ancient Egypt, which was around 15 to 1000 BC. The body was dehydrated for 40 days. Okay. But the total embalming took 70 days. And we, when you start looking at time, what year, and this is, a guesstimate, I guess you can say, Yaakov died around 1647 BC. Okay. So around 1647 BC. And so, Yosef goes to Pharaoh and says, my father made me promise to take his body back and, bury him with his fathers. And he's like, let me do that. Okay, verse 6. And Pharaoh responded, go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Yosef went to bury his father. With him went all of Pharaoh's servants, the leaders of his household, and the leaders of the land of Egypt, along with the entire household of Yosef, his brothers and his father's household. Only their little ones and their flocks and their cattle did they leave in the land of Goshen. Moreover, there went with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very large caravan. And when they arrived at the threshing floor in Atad, beyond the Jordan, they raised a loud and bitter lamentation, mourning for his father for 7 days. And when the local inhabitants, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the floor of Atad, they said, how bitterly the Egyptians are mourning. This is why the place was given the name of Vel Mitzrayim, the mourning of Egypt, and there beyond the Jordan. So notice, here they are at Atad, okay, the threshing floor in Atad. And in Hebrew, it reads Goren HaAtad. And Atad, the Atad plant is actually thought to be the plant that made the crown of thorns that was placed on Yeshua's head. And so Goren HaAtad is literally a field of thorns, is what the name means.
only stopped there to do the lamentation for the 7 days.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, so it never was really explained about that.
No,
so.
but when you think about what this is saying, that this was here, that, the name Goren Hatad is literally like a field of thorns.
Mhm.
And so, like I said, this would have been like the crown of thorns that Yeshua would have worn. In Matthew 27, verse 29, it says, in verse 28, they stripped off his clothes and put on him a scarlet robe and wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head and put a stick in his right hand. And they kneeled down in front of him and made fun of him. Hail to the King of the Jews. Okay. So, here it was at Goren HaAtad that they had this bitter mourning and lamenting. And they were lamenting, so we've got Yosef, who's standing there in the Goren HaAtad. Well, Yosef is a picture of the Messiah. So here is Yosef in the Goren HaAtad, the Messiah in a crown of thorns, and all of Israel is weeping for their father. So think about the picture. You've got Yeshua in Matthew is in a crown of thorns, and basically all of Israel is weeping for Yeshua.
Is,
It's that same picture.
does Joseph live in the land of Goshen with his brothers and his father?
Yeah.
And now they-
Well, I think he probably,
talks about how they left the land of Goshen, all of them, family.
yeah.
So I didn't know if he was living still in the.
Palace. I think he's probably in the palace, but he put them because he tells his family to live in Goshen. He was going
Well,
to,
it said the house of Yosef and his brothers.
they all left
They
from,
left.
yeah, I think when they left, they took took Yaakov from there.
Yeah, I understand that. They left their family members, I would say.
Yeah, he left all of his family there except,
That's what I was curious about.
but since he was the ruler during that time, I think he was, in the, Pharaoh's house.
And it's something we never know either, like I asked you about Ephraim and also being circumcised. Were they left behind? That was their grandfather, but,
But I think they probably went because a lot of it, well, and you had a lot of Israel went. I mean, not, the Egyptians went. Yeah, a lot of the Egyptians went.
Yeah.
But, the mourning period, in Hebrew is Shiva, and it lasts for 7 days. And so you see, this is where they get it from, that it lasted for 7 days. And that's just like I was telling Eddie, I do.
Shiva,
Mhm.
is that.
Yeah. Is that, part of the service that I watch on Friday nights, one of the cantors there, his father just passed away in Israel. And so he's in Israel sitting Shiva. So for 7 days. So that was, came up. So, okay. Zechariah 12 and verse 10. Zechariah 12 and verse 10. In Zechariah 12 and verse 10 says, and I will pour out on the house of David and on those living in Jerusalem a spirit of grace and prayer, and they will look to me whom they pierced. They will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. They will be in bitterness on his behalf, like the bitterness of a firstborn son. So, thinking about here, this is a prophecy, and you look at how prophetic this is, it's sort of, making a reference to Yeshua here, that they're going to mourn him like the firstborn son, just like we see Yosef mourning here.
And you think back to like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they some of them were still alive and the others was alive on that.
Mhm.
But right now, at this point, Jacob, y'all, no one's of that his family back is left alive, are they? I mean, cause
I'd have to go back and look. I don't, yeah. 47 when he dies, yeah.
Yeah, so probably they are all gone. I mean,
Yeah.
let's see, Isaac, yeah, no, Isaac was Jacob, yeah.
I'd have to go back and look and see if you're still alive, so.
Yeah, Jacob, yeah.
Okay,
So,
and remember, Joseph made, all of Israel promise that they take his bones out. We see that in Genesis 50, verse 25. It says, then Joseph took an oath from the sons of Israel. So he's going to make the sons of Israel say, God will surely remember you, and you are to carry my bones up from here. So he was wanting them to do the same thing, take his bones when they come to leave out of Egypt.
yeah.
And we see this also in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22. So Hebrews 11, verse 22 says, by trusting, Yosef near the end of his life remembered about the exodus of the people of Israel, and he gave the instructions about what to do with his bones. So we see that, right before Yosef dies, he wants them to take his bones out of Egypt too.
So they would do the same thing with him.
Probably, yeah, embalming. So okay, and if you go back to we actually see this happening and when we get to the book of Exodus, and if we go to Exodus chapter 13 and verse 19, it says that Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him, for Yosef had made the people of Israel swear an oath when he said, God will certainly remember you, and you are to carry my bones up with you away from here. So we see it actually, and he made them promise. We see it in the Brit Hadashah, where we had the remembrance that why he made them promise about them coming out of Egypt. But then in Exodus, we see them actually doing that they're, taking the bones up. So just as Yaakov made Yosef promise to take his bones out and return him to the land, Yosef makes the children of Israel promise to take him out, and all of Israel, comes out of the land. We don't have, Joseph being left there. They're coming out. So basically that is the end of Genesis here. Basically, when you look at Yaakov's blessing, what I wanted to focus on was Yaakov's blessing this time was a prophetic picture for the tribes in the end times. And it's a picture of us, of what we need to learn from each one of those tribes.
So it came down, Joseph was last left, the brothers too. I'm sent way, they would have been way over him, so they couldn't, but their family was still there in Egypt. So it came all the way down to Moshe, wasn't it? All the way down.
Yeah, until he brought them out.
Because they were part of the called lineage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they were the Levites. You
Yeah.
remember they were the
Yeah.
tribe of Levites. So, but when you look at them,
Moshe wasn't really a priest per se. He was raised by the Egyptians too, like Joseph.
yeah, but he's from that line. He's basically, the priesthood.
Because Aaron, it fell to Aaron to do most of that, wasn't it?
Yes. Because remember, Joseph,
Aaron was the oldest.
well, because Moses said that, you remember that he didn't have
speech.
Yeah, he didn't have good speech, so he wanted, his brother to do it. So instead, his brother ends up being the priest, really. And Joseph ends up, not Joseph, but Moses ends up being like God to the people. Remember, he says, you're going to be.
You start studying all this and you have to check your mind and wrap it around who you're thinking of. Because, it goes through so many generations within a short, things like short period there, but it is a long period. But, you have to wrap it because they all live in longer.
Yeah, they do live on
with each other.
Yeah,
so,
And two, you've got to remember they're really only in Egypt for 210 years
Say 400.
because it says they're going to be oppressed, remember, for 400. So remember if you go all the way back to Esau, that's when the promise is given. And so there was,
So all
that is included. Yes.
Yeah.
So that was really it.
Yeah.
But,
You just have to wrap your mind around it and get it away from everything we grew up with around here and think back. They lived longer. They had, family that was still alive.
Right,
Blah,
yeah.
blah, blah.
Yeah, and there's so many generations that are there.
Yeah.
And so then as you end a book, it's traditionally you say Hazak, Hazak, Vayechi, which is be strong, and be strengthened in that book. So we have finished the book of Genesis, Bereshit, and so
That's called the Joshua too.
yes, yeah,
I think it was.
yeah, to be strong and be strengthened. And so then we get ready to go into the next book next week. So Exodus. So
That's pretty good. You have to really get your mind around something.
oh, we get to move that. So
Amen.
this
Everybody wants to get ready for the blessing. We'll have the blessing over the congregation. Get their tallit and everything ready. Good lesson. Mm.
okay. Thank you. Okay, you ready?
Mm. Everybody ready?
Not yet.
Jen, y'all ready?
We're getting there.
No, I'm straightening it up. It was all chunked up in the back of my neck.
Okay.
Okay, that.
Yeah, we ready, Eddie.
Okay, though. Yebereka ya habavirish meireha. Ya hava penava ileka behuneka. Yesa ya hava penavileka. Vayishim leka shalom. May Yah bless you and keep you. May Yah make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yah lift up his face toward you and give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Go in peace. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Again, some of this, it reminds you over and over that, God's got a plan for all of us, for our lives. And if sometimes the hardest thing to do is be patient. And, because sometimes we look with physical eyes and not spiritual eyes. And sometimes it's difficult, but I've said it for years, if you stay faithful, God's going to set a path for you when you're younger, when you're in your middle age, and when you get older. And he's going to be there for us. He's never going to let us down. He's going to be with us until the end. Amen. That's what the Apostle Paul says. I fought the good fight. I've kept faith. He stayed to the end, and that's what we got to do. When we look at this world, sometimes you want, you think throw your hands up and give up, but we can't. We've got to fight and pray and love each other to the very end. Kenny, it was, I guess, you retired and you working so long at a place, you wondered, all these years, you still had a starting place and you had a finishing place. But God's kept you all this time.
He has.
And he's touched you and your family and all of us. No matter what we've been through, we've looked back at our life and a lot of times, some tough things. How did I get through it? I feel like sometimes I should have been dead 10 times. But Yah, through his mercy and through the prayers of mamas and daddies, we're still here. We're still trying to do his work. We're still trying to love the people and be friends and be in unity. And I want to thank everybody for all they've done for us and keep on doing for us and loving us. And we loving you. But remember, Yah, he loves us more than anything. And one day we're all going to be together and we all look forward to that. Amen.